We're back with Brighty of the Grand Canyon, Chapter 13, Within the Black Tunnel. Summer faded, the Indian paintbrushes and the grasses dried so there were a little taste left in them. Nights grew cold and laid a breath of hoarfrost on the meadow. Brighty took to sleeping in an old cliff dwelling where he could nestle into the dry leaves that whirled in through the opening. But as the weather sharpened, mountain lions often left their tracks close to his sleeping place, and coyotes and wolves grew bolder. And when one day Brighty's whiskers were iced by the moisture of his own breath, his mind began pulling him toward the canyon. Down there the wind would blow warm over his body, and the sand would scratch him pleasantly, and there would be water running night and day, with never a skim of ice on it. He suddenly seemed driven to leave the rim top, and he started out, his feet hurrying him toward his warm winter home. As he went by the cabin, Uncle Jim happened to glance out the window. He was standing at the table pouring a cup of coffee for the sheriff, who had come to pay him a visit, and he stopped with the cup only half full. Puzzled, the sheriff followed Uncle Jim's gaze. "Rope him, you dang fool," he said. "Don't just stand there goggle-eyed." Uncle Jim put down the coffee pot and hurried to the door. His hand rose to his mouth and he started to call out, but something made him change his mind. "Goodbye, feller," his lips said. "I'll be seeing you again when the lupine blues." He stood silent in the doorway, watching Brighty step lightly along, head nodding, ears flopping. He watched until a small gray figure was swallowed by the forest gloom. "Who can rope a wild, free spirit?" he asked with a little burst of pride. The sheriff let out a snort. "Humph," he exploded. "Who am I to say? I can't even rope a killer I know is crawling somewhere in the canyon. It's been 10 months since Old Timer was murdered, and I ain't found the killer yet." All that winter, Brighty roamed the inner reaches of the canyon alone. Sometimes, when the wind was still, he thought he heard voices, like his own on the mesa across the big river. But soon the wind would strike up and the voices would be lost in it. Snow fell again on the rim top and sifted down, building again the white fence, penning him in the canyon. No human beings angled down this trail, and the days drifted by like slow-moving clouds. One day, towards spring, when Brighty was skirting the snow line, he took a notion to make a trip all the way down to the Colorado River. Just as day was breaking, he set forth. Bright Angel Creek tumbled over the rocks and babbled to him as he went along. The noise made it shut out the rumble of thunder, and he felt the small rain on his nose before he saw it. At first it was not much more than a splash. Then there were more splashes, scattered here and there in the dust of the trail. By and by, the drops smalled, coming closer and closer together, and then the fury of the storm suddenly let loose. Great inky clouds rolled down from the summits. Lightning flashed in yellow veins, joining crag to crag. Thunder roared, and torrents of water spilled from the heavens. They sluiced over Brighty's head and funneled into his ears. They spouted down the hairy watershed over his eyes. The wind worked with the rain, blowing and battering at him, and swirling a gray curtain around him until it was too thick to see through. He slipped on a rock and fell to one knee, while the rain pummeled him and seeped through his hair and into his skin. He scrambled up and went groping blindly, letting his feet see for him, letting them feel their way along. Some homing instinct seemed to guide him, for all at once he found himself on a ledge leading to the Little Mimi mine, and then he was ducking his head in and under the rough-hewn entrance of the black tunnel. A stench rose to his nostrils, not just of foxes come and gone, and their droppings left behind, but a man smell that pulled a trigger in his mind. Except for the rain, he would have fled from the smell, but he was cold and wet, and the tunnel was warm and dry. He wriggled in and suddenly felt two human hands striking against his chest. They were trying to push him out of the tunnel onto the rocks below. With a startled scream, Brighty struck down with his head, hitting the man's head. It made a dull echo in the tunnel. He sledgehammered again and again until he felt the hands lose their force. As he came on into the darkness, he could sense the man backing away, keeping distance between them. The tunnel was quiet now, except for the rain gushing down over the entrance. But away from the rain, he heard a smaller sound, a steady ticking sound that he remembered. He sank to the floor in exhaustion, listening. All that night there was no let-up to the storm. It loosened boulders and sent them crashing down the cliffs until the floor of the tunnel quaked. Brighty slept fitfully, waking to the rock slides and to his hunger gnawing. A sour biscuit was flung in his direction, but it smelled of dead beaver and he only nosed it. With the morning, the rain petered out and a murky light filtered into the tunnel. It outlined the figure of a man, and what he was doing touched off a small, sharp message to Brighty. He was winding a shiny gold watch with a gold key.